to remember that I am here only for a few decades, that I will die, as will everybody else that I know. This is highly recommended in all traditional Christian as well as Buddhist or any other monasteries. It was a very common practice. A monk meeting another monk will say, "Brother, remember death." And there is a strong tendency in us not to remember death. In fact, maybe some of you would know all this. In the great epic in India called the Mahabharata, there is a celestial spirit called Yaksha. And this is called the Yaksha Prashna, if you like, the question of the celestial spirit. And the question is, what is the greatest mystery in the world? And the only acceptable answer to this celestial spirit of this question is that everybody sees people all around him dying, but nobody believes that he too will die. That, according to this celestial spirit, is the greatest mystery in the world. And all of these things one can read in this scripture, that scripture, or this epic or that epic. But personally, I always recommend, both to myself and any of my friends who would listen to me, we always need to ask, how does it apply to me? Christ has said wonderful things, so has Krishna, so has Buddha, all very remarkable things. How does it apply to me? How do I respond to this? So in this case now, do I ever remember death? Death generally, but that I will die, it has very severe consequences whenever I can remind myself. And my own impression is that now, this particular pandemic, the COVID-19, is more or less reminding us again and again. But we tend to forget something. As far as I know, these figures may be a little one way or the other, but in the last nearly 4 months, I gather almost 1/3 people have died on the planet. But a very quick reminder to you, we have 7.5 billion people on the planet, and the average lifespan, you can check all this on Google, is approximately 71 years old. So that means in 71 years, 7.5 billion people will die. What does it mean? Every year, more than 100 million people die. So in the last 4 months, more than 35 million people have died. And this pandemic, what is it? 1/3 Less than 1% of the people who are dying in any case. But on the other hand, it is our general nature, human beings, that any serious issues, we try to avoid them until later. So we don't actually realize that I too will die. And that sometimes requires a state of emergency. So I think COVID-19 has one great advantage, to remind us that each one of us will actually die. I have had a couple of very close friends, quite seriously interested in spiritual matters, but 2 of them were diagnosed with cancer. Then it completely changed their whole attitude, their whole activity. So in a certain way, the COVID-19 is creating that kind of emergency for most of us. And certainly it's an extremely unusual situation. Almost 3/4 of the whole of humanity seems to be in lockdown at one stage or the other. Gradually they're now beginning to open. But especially in the whole month, most of them, from the middle of March to the middle of April, 3/4 of human beings locked down. And so it has been very much a reminder of the situation. But one needs to put this in the perspective that I just mentioned to you. It's less, the deaths caused by COVID-19 are less than 1% of the usual deaths being caused. And of course, at the same time, one should not forget the other side. As many kids will be born, in fact, more will be born during the same time. So we are on a large conveyor belt. In India, there is a very common expression, punarap jananam, punarap maranam, being born again, dying again, it continues. But when I can remind myself of this, that the Mother Earth has a very fecund womb and a very destructive jaw simultaneously working.